right, thank you, Matt. Hi, everybody. Welcome. As Matt said, my name is Christina Wilson. I'm a manager at H&R Block, and I'm currently accountable for many app dev teams, one of which is the MyBlock app dev team, and that's what we're going to talk about today as far as our Ionic implementation. Before we get started, I want to go over kind of just our agenda and what we're going to talk about today. But first, I want to welcome you to our COVID life. Obviously, we, like many of you, are working from home right now. Nick Trower, who you're going to meet in a little bit, is actually in the office. So we've kind of been back and forth a bit, but for the most part, we're back at home. Many of us are looking forward to being back in the office, and some of us are really enjoying the home life. So we're just kind of going with the flow and adapting to the situation, which is also what we've had to do with our business. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So like I said, first I want to start with just an H&R Block overview. I think most of you are probably familiar with our brand, but definitely want to talk about some of the products and services we have and the ways that we've shifted in the market over the past, really honestly, 50 years. Then we're going to talk about digital transformation at Block and what that means to our organization and how technology is really driving the client experiences that we want to achieve. And we'll get more into that in a couple minutes. And then, of course, we're going to talk about our Ionic partnership with MyBlock. And as I said, MyBlock is one of the teams that I lead. And we have a web and mobile application. And we just recently, as Matt said, were able to last week get that to the App Store using Ionic. So we're super excited about that achievement. And then after that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Nick Trower, who is our solution architect. And he's going to talk pretty in-depth technically about what micro app architecture looks like, how it can benefit your organization, what it's meant for us. And then he's also going to cover our Stencil and Capacitor implementation as it relates to Ionic. And then, of course, we're going to both be available for some live Q&A. So with that, I am going to go ahead and kick us off and get started. So there's a lot of words on this slide, and I'm certainly not going to read them to you all, but I did want to give you some information about H&R Block. So again, most of you are probably familiar with the brand. Traditionally, when people think of H&R Block, they really think of it as, a seasoned organization. We're 65 years old, founded in Kansas City by two brothers, Henry and Richard Block. And at the time, it was really about that in-office retail tax prep experience, right? So people would come to our office with papers in hand and hand them over to a tax pro, and they would complete their tax return and snail mail them into the IRS. And so as you can imagine, as technology and the world around us has changed, we've had to adapt to that as well with our business model. We are a global company. We have a large retail footprint in the United States, but we also have presence in countries like India, Australia, Canada, and we're hoping to continue to grow that over time. So just some quick kind of statistics about us. We have filed over 800 million tax returns. Typically, those are handled by about 80,000 tax professionals. We hire that many folks, that many tax experts across the US annually to help complete those returns for our clients. And as I mentioned, we have a fairly large retail footprint. So we're talking about close to 10,000 retail locations in the United States and elsewhere. In addition to just tax prep services, we do have DIY options as well. So clients can use our award-winning tax prep software. They can go online to hrblock.com and file their return on their own completely. Outside of tax prep, we also offer some other products. So we have a financial product suite that's called our Emerald Card, and there are quite a few services under the umbrella of Emerald Card. And so that's really a year-round product that we offer to help folks manage their money. And in addition to that, we do have small business expertise and services, and we plan to continue to grow that, especially during this time of COVID. We want to be there for those small businesses to help them grow and thrive. So as I mentioned, we're a large retail organization. as with all other retail organizations, we've had to really rethink our business model, right? Like, people don't want to always go in store anymore. They want to go to Amazon. They want to go to an online site and click a few buttons and have something delivered to their home. With that, we've had to really rethink tax prep and how can we serve tax clients digitally, and how can we make it really that assisted experience without having people go to the office. And what's really the pillar of that is digital transformation, right? So we have to have technology to drive those experiences. And, we were well down the path of getting there. But obviously COVID hit last year, right in the middle of tax season. So if you remember, we kind of got to the peak of that in the March timeframe, and tax season was actually extended through July. And so we as an organization really had to accelerate our goals for transformation. And so what that meant was we had to figure out ways for our tax pros to do returns outside of the office, to interact with their clients in a secure way outside of the office, and really just make sure that we can still provide the world-class services that we do in a very different way in a very short amount of time. And that was all very driven by technology. So again, just based on all of those factors, now more than ever, it's really important that we're able to serve our clients however they want to be served, wherever they want to be served, with a year-round support model. So this here with some animations is really kind of just a visual of what I talked about. And again, we do offer, a straight digital experience where I, as a client, can go in and file my return online without any help outside of the software and the online expertise that we offer. But this kind of illustrates what the different cross-channel experiences are that we offer with our tax pros. And if we think about tax preparation, we kind of think about it in 3 different phases. So the first phase is really our interview phase, and that's, the intake process. So that's where the client is working with their tax pro to explain their tax situation, get them their tax documents, set expectations. And then that middle lane is really when tax prep happens. So the tax pro is completing your return either while you're there in the office or completely virtually, where you drop things off and you say, here, you go run with it, and I'll catch up with you and review that later. And then that third and final phase is what we call the wrap up. And so again, the client can go into the office there, they can sign their paperwork, pay for their return, and we'll e-file it with the IRS, or we can now do that virtually as well. So in order to enable all of these experiences, as I mentioned, we really have had to focus on digital transformation, speed to market, and how we can optimize our tech stack. So I'm going to kind of quickly just talk like at an enterprise level about what some of those pillars are that we've adopted in order to, move forward and modernize our technology. The first one of those things has really been the journey to the cloud. So we're continuing that, but by and large, we want to be a cloud-based organization and take advantage of all of the things that has to offer. MyBlock, which is one of the applications that the application that we went with Ionic for, is a cloud-native application. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next couple of slides. In addition to that, we have been focused on DevOps, and we believe in it as a methodology. We believe that that's really the right way that we want to start building features. We want to have autonomous feature teams that are able to quickly deliver functionality to the market. And so what DevOps processes offer us is automation, CI/CD pipelines, different team structures, many different ways that we can optimize how we deliver software. And so, of course, that's a journey, again, not going to happen overnight, but we're on our way there and super excited to be thinking about not only our technology, but our processes in a brand new way. And then, of course, we're really working to standardize just our architecture and our development processes, as well as our tech stack across applications, making sure that we're using the same front end and back end technologies, and making sure that our developers really have the same expectations set for them so that they can all be successful. And then, of course, one of the things that we wanted to make sure we were doing was taking advantage of software like Ionic, which is helping us drive our mobile strategy forward, right? So previously we had a web app for MyBlock, we had an Android native app and a iOS native app, and so that's 3 different code bases to maintain. And so Ionic has really helped us with streamlining that, having one, by and large, one code base, less the plugins that we have to do natively still. But like I said previously, it's been a really a great engagement, and honestly, we did not spend more than a few months getting there. We surely have things that we need to continue to work on and optimize, but we were really able to quickly adopt that technology and get our apps in the app stores again as of last week, which is really exciting. And then the last thing really here that I wanted to cover is just, organizationally implementing that micro app architecture. Again, Nick is going to give you guys a really good overview of what that means and how that can help your organization. But if we talk about MyBlock, and actually I'll cover this again in a couple of slides, we have already proven out that micro app architecture works and that we can, within Ionic, build in capabilities that are completely developed by other teams. And so that really gives us an advantage in being able to use a capability that one team builds across the organization so that we're not building it, 3, 4, 5, 6 times in order to build an end-to-end client experience for those cross-platform offerings. All right, so moving on, I did just want to give you guys, as I said, MyBlock is the application that we have used Ionic to help us with, and we have a web and mobile app for this, and I wanted to kind of just give you an idea of what that is and why it's so important to our business. So we have kind of a parity tax pro application for our tax pros to manage, but we really consider MyBlock our client portal, right? So it's our one-stop shop for clients to access 24/7, manage their taxes from anywhere on any device, desktop, tablet, and phone, right? So MyBlock allows them to manage their current year tax prep experience. They can set tax appointments. They can view prior year tax returns, check e-file status for their returns. This is where they would go to secure message with their tax pro. So, maybe your tax pro has a question for you. You're going to get a notification that there's a question, and you'll be able to securely message with them back and forth. We also have integration with LendingTree, and so clients are able to view their free credit score. If they are using our Emerald card, they also have access to that financial product suite and the ability to view, their card balances, account balances at any time. And then they can also share documents with their tax pro. So if we go back to kind of that intake process, right, the interview process, this is where if I was doing that virtually, I would go ahead and upload my tax documents to MyBlock, and my tax pro then would be able to go and access those. And then maybe I'm missing a document, and the tax pro is going to secure message me and say, hey, I need you to, send me A, B, or C, and we can have that communication back and forth and do that completely virtually outside the office. So as we assessed our tech stack, this was one of the things that we wanted to move on very quickly from a modernization perspective. All right, so, as I mentioned, this was a strategic application for us, and I'm just gonna hit kind of some of the key points of our MyBlock rebuild. So previously, it was a monolithic on-prem application. It was really hard to make updates. It wasn't something that was flexible, not anything where we could have a lot of speed to market and making changes for our clients. And so when we thought about that, again, we rebuilt this completely from the ground up. It's a cloud native application. We are leveraging a micro app architecture, and we're using Angular for our front end development. Angular is also it lends itself well to the Ionic platform integration. So it's another driver that really pushed us to select Ionic, and it's proven itself to be a great advantage for us. I already kind of hit this one, but when we talked about just really how we are very interested right now in speed to market and efficiency, and managing a web app and 2 separate mobile apps was just no longer efficient for us. So that's part of the reason that we really needed to streamline our development and build cycles, and that's why we really began our journey with Ionic. Just going back to kind of the beginning of that, we started, I would say, back in May with Ionic, and we did a proof of technology, just to make sure that we could prove this out, that it would work. We were already looking at micro app architecture and wanted to make sure that this would be the right partner for us. And we fairly quickly, I feel like, identified that we felt like this was going to work. And like I said, we really started active development. I have October on this slide. It was probably more like in the September timeframe, but we really started hitting it hard from a development perspective, October, November, and we were able to just release our first new progressive web app as well as the mobile builds through Ionic this last week. So, we'll give you guys the link, but would love for you all to go and take a look and ask us any questions that you have. But it's a really exciting step for our organization. And then, as I mentioned, I just want to give you guys a quick example of how we're using micro apps in MyBlock. So one of those, as I mentioned, is, secure messaging. Secure messaging is actually a capability that was built by a completely different team and is hosted in their environment. And so what we were able to do with that is take that capability and encapsulate it in our Ionic code base and deploy it within our mobile app as well as our progressive web app. And so again, we proved that that's working well for us. And it would have been in the past something that we would have to rewrite within our team. And that's really just extra overhead and essentially throwaway work. So that really has been an efficient strategy for our organization, and we're excited to continue down that path. So I know that was a lot, but at this point, I do want to go ahead and turn it over to Nick Trower, our app architect, and he's going to talk more in depth, as I said, technically about micro app architecture, as well as our implementation of Capacitor and Stencil with the Ionic build. But yep, I guess I'll turn it over to you, Nick, and thank you all so much for your time and for just listening to us, and hopefully you're finding some of what we're talking about beneficial.
Thank you, Christina. Hey everyone, I'm Nick Trower. I'm the solution architect for H&R Block's client applications. So as Christina described our phenomenal digital transformation over the last year, I'm going to spend a little time describing some of the architectural decisions involved in making all of that happen. And one of the principles that we focused on was how do we increase our speed and agility. And Christina already shared, we were looking at micro app architectures, and I think it's important for me to describe, our terminology of a micro app architecture. Most of you probably have heard the term micro front end or micro UI development, right? So those of you that are using Stencil from Ionic, you're probably very familiar with the custom HTML elements. So imagine extending that concept, to an end-to-end using your micro UI along with microservices, and then the data access layer and the data components that's behind that. And so, as you can see on my screen here at the bottom, where I have capability 1, UI, and the microservice, and the database, right? So that makes up a micro app, right? And a micro app it's a small application. It's a standalone. It can operate independent of any other application, but ideally that it's a capability that you want to include in a broader application, right? So think of an example in MyBlock. We have a document capability, so you can upload documents, you can view documents, you can share documents. So we don't want to build that just specifically for MyBlock. We want to build that for other applications in our ecosystem so that they can take advantage of that micro app and not have to rewrite the business capabilities, the business logic, the UI. We can share that. And we do that by using custom HTML elements and then defining the data binding components and the contract behind those microservices. This in a micro app, a microservice is responsible for that particular capability. And then there's a broader range architecture when we get into kind of enterprise data services. I'm not going to focus on those today, but as Christina pointed out, we were already looking at this type of architecture, a composable architecture, so that we can ensure that we have that speed and agility, especially as we were adopting DevOps and build pipelines and release pipelines. So think of the benefit of a micro app. I kind of just talked a little bit about the benefit, but here's an example, right? So let's say you want to have that full omni-channel experience. And you also want to adopt DevOps. So we're able to break up those responsibilities by team, and then that team is responsible for a specific domain, a business domain, and specific logic within that micro app. So in this example, right, I have team inspire, team search, team product, team checkout, right? The skill set that's involved in those particular teams, right? You may have a skill set that's focused on the UI design or the UI development, and then a skill set that's defined on the microservice development. But ideally, you would want, right? You want a full end-to-end skill set, and you may even divide your teams up to have those skill sets. But the other thing that was key for us as part of micro apps, right? So not only do we want to share those across our organization and our ecosystem, it was key for us as we were looking at new mobile technology. Our legacy mobile technology, we had native app developers, we had web developers, we had different code bases. And it was to sync those up, as you guys probably are aware, right? It takes a lot of coordination and communication to do that. Well, that doesn't fit within our principle of speed and agility. And so by taking advantage of our micro apps that we've already developed, it lended itself nicely with Ionic, because we had a lot of these capabilities already developed in Angular. We already had a lot of the data services developed, and as we went through our evaluation, again, that's why I think we were able to go speed to market with our new mobile application, because we didn't have a lot of complications. It fit nicely within that framework. So again, I was just talking a little bit about that, and then the feature team structure, right? We're able to focus on the feature teams. It's organized around business capabilities, specialized in end-to-end developers. But then think about your pipelines. When you think about a monolithic application, it's a large application, and you're writing hundreds to thousands of lines of unit tests for larger applications. Well, that becomes that gets complicated and bloated. So when you break it down into a micro app architecture, you have smaller test cases. You can even break those test cases up by the UI and the back end development and the data access layer into separate pipelines, separate builds, separate releases. So you're simplifying your testing, and you're as like I call it, you make your CI/CD pipeline skinny. You make them smaller, less complicated. Your teams are able to move much faster. So the core idea around micro apps is, being able to, one, technology agnostic, right? So at H&R Block, we chose to use Angular as our client-side tech stack, but you don't have to. And we use a lot of .NET. We have some other tech stacks within our organization. You don't have to use. You can pick and choose, and you can actually run those because they are independent. They run separately of each other. They're hosted separately. So that's the advantage, where you can be agnostic to the technology stack that you want to use, and then you're able to isolate the team code. And so ultimately, what I mean by that is, if I have a document capability, and Christina talked a little bit about our secure messaging capability, right? Those are developed by two different teams. They're hosted on two different environments. The pipelines are separate. The testing separate, right? But what happens is I can take both of those capabilities, and I can encapsulate those into a larger application, which we did do with the MyBlock progressive web app and our mobile app. So, by using Azure Artifacts, versioning control, uh, test automation, scripting automation, build automation, we were able to make all of that possible and be able to share that, the capabilities across multiple applications, which I'll talk a little bit about in my last slide. So it's not, it's more than just, writing the UI, writing the backend data services. You want to be able to promote your brand, right? And so we've been actually, H&R Block's been using Stencil for quite some time to, automate the build of our web components. And we call it Block Design System. In its framework, Agnostic, it's really focused on simplifying the development process while maintaining the consistency of our brand. And that's one of the things that we just, on our customer journey, where we unified our brand. And I hope you guys go out and download the MyBlock application. It has a whole new brand to it. It looks pretty cool. But why would somebody do that, right? And just the whole reason that Ionic developed Stencil, right? So it's just like Lego bricks. You can orchestrate these components. They're scalable, they're extendable, they're maintainable, they're reliable. But ultimately, for us, since we are using Angular for our front end apps, we wrap our core block design system. We need to be able to make those packages available to our developers, and we do that through BDSNG. And the advantage that provides, right, is data binding and the behavioral capabilities to the web components. When I talk about document management and I talk about uploading documents, which we have available in our mobile app, we don't want that experience to be different, for our client-facing apps versus our internal-facing apps. Now, there may be some slightly different business logic, but we want to write that once and reuse it many times in many different applications, right? And that's how we get speed and agility. So, and also Christina talked about Capacitor, right? So as we evaluated different mobile technologies, since we were already, again, bringing up the micro app development concept, we were already writing micro apps, we were testing the micro apps. Our skill set, the skill set to do that for custom HTML elements in Angular, right, are web developers. So, and we didn't want to maintain separate pipelines for native mobile apps versus web apps. We wanted that cross-platform experience. And so when we looked at Ionic, again, it fit nicely. It lended itself nicely to what we were doing from an architecture and organization. And so as a part of that, we're using Capacitor, which, we have our iOS application, our Android, our progressive web apps. Some of the things that we're taking advantage of is the camera, the in-app browser, file system, push notifications, splash screens, status bar, storage, plugins. And also, we do have some native mobile developers that, because we still have some third-party plugins that we have to customize. But again, with Capacitor, it works nicely. We're able to use our existing code structure. We're able to port that over and take advantage of that. So to bring all of that together, right, what you see on the left screen is we want one experience for multiple apps, and that's really the story around micro apps, right? I go back to writing code multiple times that could have different logic, but ultimately it's supposed to do the same thing. Well, that's difficult to manage, and micro app makes that very easy to manage. And then in your mobile app, right, you have a capability, in our MyBlock mobile application, we have a capability known as our Emerald card. That app can actually it's hosted separately. It can run by itself, but we have it integrated into our mobile app, and we link out to that application. And in some cases, we actually embed that actual code inside of our build for our mobile app, and we do that through Azure Artifacts and version control. And in other cases, we have web apps that we want to link to, and as you can see, from the screen, the experience, we don't want the user to feel like they've left the mobile application, and by using Stencil and our block design system, and by using micro app architecture, they feel like it's one app, it's one experience, and we can um, compose multiple applications as one. And then the other advantage, right, is being able to have that cross-platform experience with one code base. And we do that, right? We do that. We just recently released our progressive web app, our Android and iOS application to the app stores this last week. So that concludes our presentation. We will be live